It was my first Christmas as a pastor. And I'd been on the job almost a year. And you know, the first year of any job is especially difficult. And one of the things that was set before me as the associate pastor for families was to take on and tackle the New Year's Eve Christmas pageant. And evidently, it had once been a thing of beauty and had become a disorganized mess. And I was becoming a disorganized mess trying to get ready for this pageant. And that was our 4 o'clock service. And there was always also a 10 o'clock concert followed by the 10:30 big pageantry service, followed by caroling in the neighborhood outside until midnight, followed by it kept going, Christmas Eve. And followed by this gathering of young adults who had once been part of the church. And they would meet in our hall until the wee hours of the morning, and the associate pastor was expected to show up and, if not lead, participate. Mixed in all of that, you have to figure out how you're gonna eat. And my family was coming in to celebrate my first Christmas with me. And I was delighted and exhausted way before they ever showed up. And so all of these things happened, and the Christmas pageant, I have to say, was a slight miracle because no child's hair was caught on fire. God was looking out for all of us that night. We had a close call or two. And everything went beautifully, and it was great to see the young adults. But also, did I mention that this was a Saturday night, which meant Sunday was Christmas morning, and we had a service. And who was in charge of preaching? Me. And so I was up all night, and I didn't sleep a wink, and up ready to do Christmas the next morning. And by the time I was peeling off my robe in my office, I was ready for a long winter's nap. And there was my family, like ready to go and hungry. It was a rough Christmas, I think, for all of us, because we had hoped to be together, and it turns out my parents and my brother had a great time. They did all sorts of fun things. They tell these great stories of that Christmas in California, and I'm like, I don't remember any of these things. And they're like, well, that's because you were working the whole time. And I was like, you're right. It was a bummer. And I was not having the most festive of Christmases that year. And to be honest, I was not great company. And so when we think about Christmas stories, I know for me, I think about the joy and the good tidings of Zion and the big carols, until maybe about this time of year, and my to-do list just goes crazy and bonkers, right? And we have people to see and gifts to buy and things to get in the mail. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by the holiday. And that is before you take into account any of the sorrow or grief that happens and that comes when we miss people, when we're lonely, when we have people that we have loved spending holidays with and they're not there anymore. Our theme for Advent this year is, how does a weary world rejoice? And you may recognize that as being part of a very famous carol, O Holy Night. And the whole line of this says, a thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices. Now I can't say it without doing it in the rhythm of the hymn. And then a little bit later it says, fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, right? And it is such a response that I hope we would all have if we met an angel. And when the angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah, and he says, you're gonna have this miraculous miracle, and it's gonna be miraculous on all these different fronts. It's going to be big. A baby is going to be born to you, and you are a couple that has long given up hope of starting a family. And your son will not just be a person, but powerful, just like the greatest prophet in the scriptures, Elijah, and his work will bring fathers and children together. And this son is just the beginning because he is going to prepare the way for the Lord. And can you think of that really famous Christmas carol of Zechariah's response? No, because there isn't one. I even double-checked. There's some things called the Hymn of Zechariah. They aren't great. That's why we don't know them, because his response is not like, let's do this. You know, if we look at the conversation that an angel has with Mary, it's really different. But because she says, oh, how can all this goodness be? And the angel explains it to her, and she's like, then let it be so. But not Zechariah. He says something along the lines of like, how can I be sure of this? How will I know that it is so? And then one translation called The Message I really like, it says, do you expect me to believe all of this? That feels honest. That's what he's really saying, because his next thing is like, Sarah and I are too old for this business. Go away. I'll believe it when I see it. Right? He's older. He's seen some things. I wonder if he's weary, and if so, why? I can imagine maybe he is weary from life. Maybe he and Elizabeth are really okay with being off the roller coaster that can be family planning. They probably did that for decades, and it's been decades. They don't need to go and return to that painful experience. He's seen good people rise and fall, not only in his religious space, but in politics. He's had his hopes up, and he's had them dashed. And he's had his share of sorrow and pain and grief, both emotional and physical. I wonder if his life experience is suggesting that such good news is probably hyperbole, and he knows better than to get all excited about whatever the newest thing is. And maybe, just maybe, Zechariah is weary because he knows how tricky joy and life can be. He's a little bit weary because he knows that it can be disappointing. And joy can often seem like something that is so fleeting. One of my favorite authors, Dr. Brené Brown, is a researcher, and she suggests that joy can be difficult because it can be foreboding. And she says, we're afraid that the feeling of joy won't last, or that there won't be enough, or that the transition to disappointment or whatever is in store for us next will be just too difficult. We've learned that giving in to joy is at best setting ourselves up for disappointment, and at worst, inviting disaster. And we struggle with worthiness issues. Do we deserve joy given our inadequacies and imperfections? Do we deserve joy given that we are imperfect? Yes. Do we run from joy or push it away sometimes because we're afraid that it won't last? Possibly, yes. Some choir members are getting real behind me. Yep, we do that, yep. Do we sometimes withhold our excitements? I hope not. But probably, yes, sometimes, yeah? You know, Dr. Brown tells a story of talking with a man who is later in his life and who had always believed that expecting the worst was the best way to live. Yeah, fun guy, right? And he describes how this outlook made him feel prepared for bad things, or really anything if they were to happen. Or really, it's not if they were going to happen, but when they happen, he was going to be ready. Do you know anyone like this? Yeah. Someone who constantly goes to that worst case scenario and is difficult enjoying whatever is in front of them? Yes. I know these people too. Occasionally, I could be one of these people, or so I'm told. And then this man had a terrible tragedy, and his wife died suddenly in a car accident. And he said his perspective completely flipped, because he realized that expecting the worst did not prepare him. He was not ready for that. How could he be? And even more so, he felt like his grief was greater than he wanted it to be, because so many memories with his wife were ones where he was not fully enjoying each moment. And he admitted that his commitment to her is to fully enjoy every moment now. And that was how he was going to love her now that he is without her. And friends, I don't wish this story on any of us. And as we begin this Advent season, I want us to consider how our weariness or our fear or our foreboding or our worst case thinking might be preventing us from actually living in this moment. I wonder if some of us might need to take a moment to lay aside the weariness and to try to be fully present in this moment. In this moment. In this moment. Joy is not a state of being per se, and it is not an emotion we can just will to come forward. Joy is a gift. When we recognize that everything is as it should be, or better. And I am told that we must practice looking for it, practice laying the foundations for it, so that God might grace us with joy even in the midst of our weariness or our sorrow or whatever else might be happening. But we make way for joy as we practice gratitude, as we practice listening for God's voice, as we embrace wonder and curiosity, and as we invite possibility to live in our midst. Zechariah was dumb enough to ask God for a sign. Don't do that unless you really want it. Be very careful. Be very careful when the angel Gabriel is right in front of you, especially, because that guy has some power. And he used it, didn't he? Yeah, Zechariah's like, I'll believe it when I see it. And Gabriel's like, here we go. And Zechariah received the gift. The gift of 9 months of not being able to speak. That's a pretty long time for a silent retreat, even for like a really good Buddhist monk. That's a long time. And the whole time, Zechariah couldn't help but watch the ways that God was working in his and Elizabeth's life. And I wonder if we were to treat Advent in a similar way. What if we were to spend the next 4 Sundays taking moments to be quiet and to listen and to really observe what it is that God is doing in and around and among and through us? And I wonder what would happen to our holiday celebrations. Would joy come to us a few more times? What would it be to look for angels, to listen for God's voice, and even to invite God to show us a new path this holiday season, even and especially when we are weary? So that is my challenge this holiday to you. May you take a moment to invite God to speak to your heart. And may we find joy and excitement in the midst of all that is happening around us. May it be so.